I've picked out 10 fantastic FPL picks who are all being overlooked and all have under 10% ownership going into game week 1. Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, as promised, I've been checking out some of the best and most secure differentials that you could possibly have in your FPL team going into game week 1, being overlooked by the masses, but still great FPL picks. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and importantly, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the preseason content as we ramp up to game week 1 on August the 15th. In the meantime, let's start off by looking about Eberechi Eze. A quick note though, obviously this is all relevant at time of recording. The rule that I've been creating myself for this video is any player under 10% ownership is qualifying as a differential. It can jump. So if by the time you watch this video, Eze's gone up a little bit or down a bit, the same with all these players, then obviously it's because it was at time of recording. So trends can happen, things can move around, but right now he is very much a differential at just 6.5% ownership. And honestly, I'm kind of blown away by that. He's one of my favorite differentials out there right now. 7.5 million, I think, is a perfectly reasonable price for a player who has plenty of Premier League pedigree. We know when he's fit, he is an absolute lock in that Palace 11 and probably their best player on the entire pitch. He's got good underlying XG per 90 at 0.36. For a midfielder, that's very high. Also, adding on to that, you've got the good assist potential as well. Overall, he hits over 0.5 XGI per 90, which is kind of that sort of golden level for a midfielder that you're looking at. If we look at last season's goals and assists, he only got 8 of each, which for a player of his quality might be deemed maybe a little bit on the low side, but it is worth noting he only started 31 games because of a little injury around the middle part of the season last year, if I remember correctly. So he actually got a goal or an assist in around 50% of games, which tracks perfectly with the underlying data I've just explained. If you look at the first 4 game weeks, on paper, maybe not the easiest, but I also think the fixture difficulty rating is maybe a little bit deceptive here. Chelsea and Aston Villa, both away from home, not easy games, but having them red on the ticker like you'd have a Man City, an Arsenal or a Liverpool, I'd say they're maybe not quite as bad as that, and Palace definitely have a chance to score in either of those games. Same goes for Nottingham Forest at home, and Sunderland in game week 4 is absolutely fine. I think it's West Ham afterwards too. So as you can see, the expected points for the first 4, just over 4 points a game at around 17.6, and that tracks with last season's data as well. He runs at about 4.4, 4.5 points per game when he's playing the matches. So you've got yourself an elite performer here. He's got penalty share at Palace alongside Mateta, and we know when he's on the pitch, he gets 80 plus minutes. So for me, I think he's a player being significantly overlooked just because of a couple of red fixtures on the ticker, when actually, if you look a little bit closer, they're not all that bad. And at this price point, I think he's one of the better, if not best options. 6.5% ownership, you get a lot of benefit out of owning him. So he's one high on the radar for me. And I think when you're comparing him with other players around this price point, he ranks pretty highly. So let me know whether or not I've done enough to convince you of Eberechi Eze to start off. I am going to just quickly add on to this section now in retrospect. I didn't mention the fact that Eze has been subject to some transfer speculation over the summer. I think Arsenal are interested at the moment. So obviously, if he moves teams, that kind of affects his FPL potential a little bit, but he could still embed himself into the starting 11 pretty quickly for Arsenal as well. I would say that I've created this section if he stays at Palace. So if he doesn't stay at Palace, this probably changes a little bit, but I still think it's pretty likely he does. So if he does, I think he's a great differential. Second up, let's have a look at Evanilson. But before we do, let me know what you think of the new graphic style for this video. I've kind of switched it up a little bit. I'd be interested to know whether or not you prefer it to some of my older videos, if you've watched my channel before, of course. Evanilson, though, I think comes in at a very reasonable price of 7 million. In fact, I would go as far as saying he's come in underpriced. I think 7.5 would have been fair. At 3.3% ownership, I think that low ownership is mainly down to the fixture that they've got first up. And I think when you create your game week 1 draft, and I've fallen victim to this as well, there's a temptation to maybe build your squad with a perfect game week 1 in mind to get off to a really hot start. And you might not look so much at game weeks 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is absolutely understandable. But all I'd suggest is that unless you're looking at wildcarding game week 2, 3, 4, game week 1 itself is not the be all and end all. So if you reverse the fixtures slightly or mix them up, put Liverpool in game week 3 or game week 4, the first patch of 4 are not looking that bad at all. You've got Wolves in there, you've got Spurs in there, Brighton. After that, I think it's all the way through to game week 12 or 13 before they have a really difficult fixture again. So Evanilson coming in at a very reasonable price at just 7 million and great underlying attacking data of 0.48. And that was without penalties for the lion's share of last season as well. It's not impossible that he might get penalties this season at times too. So that data is really promising, especially for a new striker who comes into the league fresh last year. He's had a season now to bed in. The data looks great. The next 4 looks okay as a cluster rather than just the Liverpool fixture in focus. And I think, again, he's being massively overlooked. We know that he's going to get good minutes. He's by far their best striker in the team. So he's nailed into that starting 11 as long as he's fit. Comes in a little bit cheaper than some of the really popular 7.5 millions who, in a lot of cases, don't have as good underlying data as Evanilson either. And if you take that game week 1 out of contention or throw it or mix it up maybe a little bit, throw it in somewhere else, I think he becomes a very good option. And in fact, he's currently in my game week 1 FPL draft. Let me know if he's in yours below. Next up, let's have a look at defenders. And Murillo comes into the game with a price increase of $1 million coming into the 25-26 season after what was a very impressive season, not just for Murillo, but for Nottingham Forest defensively, generally speaking, as well. Murillo himself wasn't a bad FPL option last season, but he was never really one of the headline Nottingham Forest players. You had Sells, you had Neco Williams, Ola Aina as well, even Milenkovic. So arguably every single one of their defenders, barring Murillo, was probably a more popular pick at times than him. However, with FPL's new rule change coming into this season, the CBIT points that have been added on, he would have benefited big time last season from those points. So FPL obviously did some measurements and calculations based on last season's points and the underlying data of the CBIT, that is clearances, blocks, interceptions and tackles. He would have gotten a 38-point benefit last season, which obviously that's a massive swing. That's effectively almost 10 extra clean sheets that Murillo would have gotten last season in terms of raw points. But what it does mean is that if you took last season's points and added this on, he would have actually been the top point scoring defender in the entire league in FPL. He comes in at 5.5, so it's not cheap, but a decent run at the start of the season. The first 3 don't look too bad. Brentford, Crystal Palace, West Ham. I would say in all 3 of those games, there's at least a decent chance of a clean sheet. And Murillo, considering, I think in 50% of the games last season, he would have got those 2 extra points for the CBIT. He's got a good chance of having a very high floor this season as well. Even without the clean sheets, we might be looking at 4 pointers for him more often than not. So even if he is 5.5 million, it's not cheap. He doesn't get a lot of attacking returns either, only 2 goals last season. But we saw from last season, if you converted those points across, he could be a really elite pick. And at just 2.7% ownership, I think it's mainly due to the price bump and the fact that we're still looking at the raw points from last season without throwing into the equation what difference the CBIT points would have made. So I think he's going under the radar massively. Some of the 6 million options are very popular right now at 0.5 cheaper. You've got yourself what would have been the top point scoring defender with decent fixtures for the first 3. Yes, Arsenal in 4 is difficult, but it's not a bad run to start off with. And after that, they play 2 promoted clubs pretty soon after as well. So I really like Murillo. He's not currently in my draft, but I do have a Nottingham Forest defender. I'm wondering if maybe I shift it so Murillo is in my starting 11 to begin with. So another Nottingham Forest player that benefits massively from the new point scoring system is Elliot Anderson. He comes into the game at 5.5 million. And if this new addition to the scoring system hadn't been included, 5.5 would have been a no-go. There is not really much fantasy appeal historically in a player like Anderson, who gets 7 or 8 attacking returns a season. He got 8 last year, 2 goals, 6 assists, and really quite poor underlying XGI data, 0.19 combined. So you are expecting an attacking return roughly 1 in 5 games. However, with the CBITR points now included, that is CBIT plus the recoveries as well, Anderson would have gotten an extra 36 points last season, which puts him up to, I think it was 143 points in the 24-25 season. Now that puts him in line with players like Elanga, with Eze, Sarr, Mitoma, ahead of players like Enzo Fernandez, I believe, Brennan Johnson, Son and Saka, who, yes, were injured for a bit, but they would have scored below what Elliot Anderson would have ended up on last season if these points had been taken into account. 5.5 million is also a really tricky price point this year. Not many players under this price look like decent fantasy options whatsoever. I'm sure 1 or 2 will stand up and look decent before preseason is over. But as it stands right now, 5.5 million, I genuinely really like the look of Elliot Anderson, and he's only owned by just north of 1% of teams right now. So almost 99% of FPL players do not have Anderson in the team. And for a player who would have scored 140 plus points last season, if he can come into the game, do similar this season, and gets more of a share of corners because Morgan Gibbs-White and Elanga are probably off. Obviously, Gibbs-White's not quite gone yet. Elanga has. But he also might take a more advanced role because Morgan Gibbs-White is likely to leave too. This is a player that has a good floor. He's getting 4 points most weeks because of the CBITR, and he's getting extra corners potentially, and he's coming in at a decent price point too at 5.5 million. I think he's a perfect 5th midfielder, honestly, and he's in my team on the bench most weeks right now in a 3-4-3, and he's a player that I can rely on if an injury strikes or rotation occurs. He gets 90 minutes almost every single week, and if he's first on my bench, I can rely on him to get 4 or 5 points most weeks, and maybe the odd attacking return 1 in 5 as well that I might get lucky with. I think it's a really good option to have, especially because it saves you from taking a -4 if he's on your bench most weeks. So let me know what you think of Elliot Anderson. I think at 1.6% ownership, he's one of the best differentials I'm going to talk about today. Another player that I'm a little bit surprised isn't owned by more teams right now is Strand Larsen. And although Man City in Game Week 1 isn't ideal, I wouldn't be massively shocked if he managed to pull off a goal in that game week. And after that, the fixtures do look pretty good for quite a while for Wolves. So again, a bit like Evanilson, I think it's that first game week fixture that is putting off a lot of managers, well under 10% ownership. And considering, again, he's new to the league last season, so this is all fresh data for a new striker, I think he did a really decent job. 14 goals, 4 assists, and not bad underlying attacking data either, 0.35 XG per 90. It's really not terrible, especially for a team that historically don't create that many chances. Now, Wolves are an interesting prospect this season because they have lost Cunha, they have lost Ait-Nouri, so maybe they're going to be a little bit weakened going forwards. But with Strand Larsen in isolation, I think that almost benefits him a little bit because he's going to be the focal point now without Cunha in the team. And actually, whenever Cunha wasn't in the starting lineup, which was a fair chunk of games last season, Strand Larsen did stand up and he did get goals and he did become that talisman for them. So I wonder, given he's had a full preseason with them, given he had a good first season, even with Cunha in the side, can he make another step up, get another 14, 15 goals, and at 6.5 million, that would be very good value. There aren't a lot of strikers out there right now. I'm going to talk about one other, but there aren't many that are 6.5 million or under that I like the look of. And Strand Larsen, again, if you're not convinced in some of the 7.5 millions, or if you want to shave $1 million off of your budget to use elsewhere, I think Strand Larsen could easily get another 10 to 15 goals this season. And that's a good price point to expect that kind of return from. After Man City's out the way, I do quite like the fixtures. And even Man City in isolation, I don't think it's impossible that a striker like Strand Larsen gets a couple of big chances, maybe even one is enough to get him over the line. And he might also take penalties this season without Cunha in the side as well. So look out for that. I think the data is going to slightly improve this season, and I wouldn't be massively surprised to see the goals improve either. So a differential striker I like the look of, 6.5 million, Strand Larsen, I'm pretty happy with. So now moving on to a couple of Brighton assets I like the look of. Welbeck is another 6.5 million striker, like Strand Larsen, that is competing for that slightly cheaper spot in your front line if you were to use that kind of system. I'd say he's a good third striker to have if you were going with a 3-4-3. He's actually got slightly better data than Strand Larsen, so 0.41 XG per 90, but got a fair few less goals than Strand Larsen did last season, only 10 in the league, 5 assists. So again, not bad whatsoever, but it is worth noting that I believe this is the first season in which Welbeck has managed double-digit returns in the league in terms of goals. So he's not a striker that historically bags 10 to 20 goals a season. He's more a striker that bags 7 to 10, which again, at 6.5 million is not all that bad, especially when you get a few assists in there as well. And this season, it looks pretty likely that he's going to be nailed in as that centre forward as long as he can stay fit. He got good minutes last season, even with Ferguson hanging around for parts of the season. Obviously, he went off on loan as well. You also had João Pedro, who was very much a factor in the starting 11, but Welbeck still managed to get very good minutes and good underlying attacking data. This season, you'd expect him to be even slightly more secure as long as Brighton don't go out and sign another striker now. So I like the look of his prospects. The first 4 fixtures, again, the colours may put you off a little bit because there's a lot of yellow, a little bit of red in there against Man City. But I don't think they're terrible fixtures. Fulham, Everton, Bournemouth in there in the first 4. And in fact, I think you have to wait all the way through to game week 15 or 16 before they go up against the likes of Liverpool or Arsenal as well. So it's not a bad set. And if you want to hold on to a striker for a little while and you're not planning on wildcarding too early, then you're happy to ride out those fixtures a little bit. And I think Welbeck is a player that is a bit of a steady Eddie pick. You can hold him for a long amount of time and he'll get a goal every other game or 1 in 3 games. And I think he'll tick over pretty nicely. So at 6.5 million, again, I think the player pool's pretty limited, and it's between him or Strand Larsen as my favoured 6.5 right now. And he's in under 10% of teams as well. So a differential I like the look of, Danny Welbeck. Let's have a look at the other Brighton player that I'm very hot on right now. So Maximilian De Cuyper is the other Brighton asset I really like the look of, who is still flying under the radar a little bit. That ownership is climbing though, so don't be surprised if you see that north of 10% soon, because I'm starting to see more and more people hyping him up on social media, and inevitably there's going to be a little bit of a snowball effect that can occur. So Maximilian De Cuyper comes into the league with a lot of attacking threat, and for a defender, this is kind of bonkers. 0.11 XG per 90 is already very good for a defender. Then you add on the XA of 0.37 per 90. That is absolutely ridiculous. And yes, it comes from an inferior league, but you'd expect that to translate at least decently coming into the Premier League. So I think the main problem with De Cuyper isn't him himself. It's actually the predecessor last season that we all got burnt by, and that was Barco. So Estupiñán historically has been the number 1 left back for Brighton, but Barco was getting a lot of hype as a 4 million defender who is, by the way, taking set pieces last season in pre-season as well. And I think because he didn't then start the season and he actually went off on loan pretty quickly as well, everyone's kind of nervous to go with another Brighton left back who's new to the league, who isn't guaranteed minutes. But Estupiñán's now gone and left the position completely unfilled for Brighton. And I would be pretty confident that he's come in as a direct replacement for Estupiñán, knowing that he is likely off in the summer. So I think his minutes, okay, aren't guaranteed because we can never guarantee it, but I would be much more confident in his minutes than I was with Barco's last season. Now, again, let's not pretend that these data points are going to completely cross-pollinate seamlessly into the Premier League. He's not going to get an attacking return in 50% of matches, but even if he can get an attacking return in half of that, in 25% of matches, that is still very good value at 4.5 million. Like I said with Welbeck, the fixtures are maybe not box office to begin the season, but I don't think they're that bad. Fulham, Everton and Bournemouth, maybe Fulham and Everton specifically, are not elite attacking forces. So clean sheets there, not out of the realms of possibility. He can get forward in those matches as well. Man City will be tricky. Bournemouth will be tricky to keep a clean sheet. But at 4.5 million, he's a player that you can have in a rotation combination with another 4.5 million defender and not need to rely on him to start every single week. So have a look at some other combinations maybe. You might not need to play him every single week in your 11. And if you can bring him in and out of the starting 11, I think he's going to be one of the best value defenders in the game. I will just add the asterisk that we were burnt last season by that Brighton left back, so I can't guarantee anything. But if we get closer and closer to the start of the season and he looks like a lock, then I will be very tempted to go there as well, and I will not be surprised to see that ownership climb and snowball a little bit as we close in on the game week 1 deadline. Another overlooked striker that I'm really interested in is Ollie Watkins, owned by less than 1 in 10 FPL managers at the moment. I think the price point is a large factor here. 9 million is not cheap, and it's not easy to build a squad with him and a couple of premiums elsewhere. And last season, he didn't actually return that badly. 16 goals, 8 assists. That's 24 attacking returns and great underlying data as well, by the way. XG per 90 of 0.52 is undoubtedly very good. Add in a little bit of assist threat there as well, and you've got yourself a brilliant FPL asset. But last season, he was kind of a non-issue, mainly because he was sharing minutes a little bit, sharing that centre-forward role with John Duran in the first half of the season and then Marcus Rashford in the second half of the season. Going into game week 1 as it stands, Aston Villa don't really have a backup centre-forward that you'd put on the same sort of level as Ollie Watkins. So I think his minutes are going to be a lot more secure than they were last year. So I would expect the goals and the assists to go up a few notches this season if we can guarantee those minutes. And right now, there's nothing to suggest that we can't. A bit like Eberechi Eze, he is subject to some transfer speculation. So this is obviously on the proviso that he does stay at Aston Villa, but we're still 3 weeks out from the start of the season. So it is one to just monitor and keep a tab on. But if he stays at Villa, is the starting centre forward, and there's not really that much competition for that role right now anyway, I think he is a player that even at 9 million is going to offer good value for money. And it's not out of the realms of possibility that he takes penalties this season either. He's historically got a pretty poor penalty record, but a striker like Ollie Watkins, he's going to want all the goals he can get, and he's probably been practicing penalties whilst he's been off of them anyway. So I wouldn't be shocked to see him on penalties. There's no guarantee there, but he's a striker that will always be aiming for 20 goals plus as long as he's still in the league. So I would expect him to take another step up this season and get back to the Ollie Watkins that we saw 2 seasons ago when he wasn't sharing minutes around and when he was getting 90 minutes week in, week out. So I think he's a fantastic FPL option. Not bad fixtures to start the season either by any means, and great underlying data. I think he's being massively overlooked. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Another Bournemouth player that I wanted to talk about in this video is Antoine Semenyo, and I think he is being overlooked, maybe with good reason, because last season he was a little bit of an FPL troll at times, but I've actually got generally good memories of him because I ended up the season with buying him in game week 38, and obviously he got 2 goals to balance things out a little bit and remove that troll status for me personally. So I still think he's a fantastic FPL option. Got 165 points last season, and when you look at some of the other 7 or 6.5 million options out there in midfield, I just want to take Morgan Rogers as the prime example, who's owned by, I think it's almost 1/3 of teams right now. Antoine Semenyo, owned by only 6%, had better underlying XG data per 90, significantly so as well, 0.27 versus 0.19 for Morgan Rogers. Very slightly worse assist threat, but not enough to bring it back down. And overall, the XGI per 90 was 0.39 for Semenyo versus 0.34 for Rogers. Semenyo is also just as locked into the starting 11 as Rogers is, so 90 minutes per match, and got 11 goals, 7 assists last season. So you're looking at about a return every other game week. Bournemouth's fixtures to start off the season are also really not that bad when you take Liverpool out of the equation, or if you shuffled the pack a little bit and put Liverpool somewhere else in there. Now, obviously, they are taking on Liverpool in game week 1, so that's a factor, but we don't usually pick our FPL sides for just one game week. So unless you're wildcarding in game week 2 or 3, I would advise taking a longer view on Bournemouth assets, like I said with Evanilson. And the fixtures after Liverpool's out the way are really pretty positive. So right now, admittedly, I've got Rogers in my starting 11 in FPL as well. And I'm just wondering whether Semenyo is a player that I've just personally overlooked as well, especially considering his underlying data is better. He got more FPL FPL points last season than Rodgers did as well. And I would say that the fixtures over 7 or 8 game weeks are about as good for Bournemouth as they are for Aston Villa. So it's a tough one for me. I don't think Semenyo's a standout good pick at 7 million, but I'm surprised that he's so lowly owned in comparison to some of the other options around that price point when he's put up this sort of data, got really good expected points over the first few game weeks, and got 165 points in FPL last season as well. I think maybe the fact that he got those points in slightly unexpected places, and he was at times a bit of a troll last season, is possibly putting a few managers off. So I wanted to quickly wrap up this video talking about the darling of FPL pre-season, especially when you're talking about those CBIT points. James Tarkowski would have benefited from an extra 44 points last season if that new rule change had been in situ last year. Now, obviously, 5.5 million is not cheap, so it's difficult to squeeze him into your starting 11, into your 15 in FPL, which is why he's probably only owned by 5% of managers. And you also have to pile on the fact that he ended the season with an injury, a pretty bad injury as well. So we need to wait and see whether he's gotten a full pre-season at Everton before going straight back into the starting lineup come game week 1. So there's risk attached to it, and we'll learn more over the coming weeks as we start seeing the lineups that Everton put out in pre-season. However, if he is fit and ready to go come game week 1, even at 5.5 million, I don't think he's a bad pick whatsoever. It's important to note that 44 extra points from CBIT is still lower than what he might have gotten if he didn't get injured. So he already had the best in the league in terms of the extra points he would have gotten. It would have taken him up to 149 points in total, making him a brilliant defender last season. In fact, only one defender got over 150 points last year, so he would have very nearly got there, despite missing matches at the end of the season. He would have hit the CBIT points in 22 games. If he played the last few matches, he might have hit a couple more as well. So we might have looked at like a 50-point benefit from him. And obviously add in some appearance points, add in maybe 1 goal or 1 assist at some point if he got lucky. You might have been looking at a player that was able to get 170, 165 points last year. I think he could be going under the radar massively if he's fit come game week 1, because that game week 1 fixture against Leeds, there's a decent chance of a clean sheet there. Brighton, Wolves, not a bad chance of a clean sheet in either of those as well. He is expensive, and I think a lot of people will ignore him because of the injury and because of that added expense. But don't sleep on him, because if he's fit and we know that he's ready to go in game week 1, this is a player that could break up the template massively if he can hit the ground running with those CBIT points. The floor could be really high, and it's not impossible he scores 1 or 2 goals this season, maybe gets an assist or 2, and Everton are always a good defence as well. So I will not be surprised if I see Tarkowski very near the top of the defender leaderboard by the end of the season, alongside Van Dijk, alongside Murillo. I really like the look of him, and he's being slept on based on the injury and based on the price point. So as we reach the end of today's video, do let me know what you think of these differentials. And of course, there are loads of other differentials that I haven't had time to speak about today. Drop your favourites in the comments below as well. And I might even make another video closer to game week 1 on extra differentials that I haven't spoken about today as well. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm really trying to hit 4,000 subscribers before the start of the season, so every little helps there. And if you could hit that notification bell, you won't miss out on any pre-season content either. Hopefully you're enjoying your drafting so far, and hopefully this video has helped you out.